Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. In today's video, we're going to talk a little bit about SINKEXs and the at least one time that we're aware of New Jersey participating in one. So the concept of a SINKEX as a modern term isn't really well documented. I'm not sure exactly when the term SINKEX starts being applied. SINKEX means sinking exercise, and it is a training exercise where you're testing new weapons and training crews on those weapons and usually sinking an obsolete ship with them. So New Jersey participates in at least one SINKEX in 1986. So we know the term dates back at least that far. That's really one of the earliest uses of the term SINKEX that I've seen. So I don't know if that term predates a little bit further. New Jersey's SINKEX was actually the only time since 1944 that she sank a warship. In this case, it was a submarine grayback. Interestingly, only one battleship ever sank a submarine in combat. It was HMS Dreadnought, happened to ram a German U-boat while sailing in the English Channel. But New Jersey also claimed a submarine, Grayback, which is the sister ship of Growler, a museum ship in New York City, right alongside Intrepid. New Jersey sinks that submarine and does the training and the testing with her Harpoon missiles here, which is the console that I'm sitting at right now in the Combat Engagement Center on New Jersey. Now, while the term SINKEX probably only starts to show up in the middle or late part of the 20th century, the concept dates back significantly further. You could easily call the Baker tests of the atomic bombs SINKEXs. When we're testing the effectiveness of atomic bombs against all those decommissioned World War II ships at Bikini Atoll, that's a sinking exercise. It's testing those weapons, it's training the crews. They even take some of the irradiated ships and then sink them with gunfire afterwards, making it even more of a SINKEX. And you often see this during sinking exercises. They'll fire a couple of different weapon systems into a ship and then knowing fully that the first one isn't going to sink it, and then they'll progressively step up the power of these weapons. Oftentimes in between shoots, they'll close down the range and send evaluators on board to see what the damage is by those weapons. And that was certainly the case, or at least it was supposed to be the case, in 1922 during the what we would now today call a SINKEX, when the first Battleship New Jersey was sunk by aircraft. She's one of the ships that General Billy Mitchell was given to expend in tests of aircraft bombs against battleships. And during those tests, they were supposed to drop a bomb, see how it did, so they could figure out what was most effective, hitting a ship with a 500-pound bomb, a 1,000-pound bomb, hitting the water next to the ship, and near misses, opening up holes in the hull. But during these tests, Mitchell pretty famously doesn't always give time for evaluators to come on board and has his aircraft drop bombs in close succession, causing the ships to sink. But again, even though that wasn't called a SINKEX, that's a very obvious example of SINKEXs from the early 20th century. But we can even take that concept 100 years further back in time. And I'm not too familiar with SINKEXs earlier than 1824. During that time period, you would have had regular solid shot being used, and I'm not too familiar with expending hulls to test solid shot or train crews on that. Even earlier than that, you would have had ships ramming, and I'm not familiar with any sinking exercises from the ancient world that would have used that. Leave a message in the comment section down below if you're aware of any instances of that. But what I believe the earliest, again, it's not called this at the time, but the earliest thing that we would now today recognize as a SINKEX was the French sinking of Pacificator in 1824. Pacificator was a Napoleonic-era third-rate ship of the line. She was all sail-powered, all wooden. She had all solid-shot guns. And several of her sister ships fight at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1806. By 1824, she's fairly obsolete and starting to get a little bit rotten. So she's decommissioned, and her hulk is expended in weapons tests. The brand new state-of-the-art weapon that the French are testing at this time is the Paxan gun. The Paxan gun is the first mass-produced shell-firing gun. It fires a little over 8-inch wide exploding shell. And these weapons would revolutionize naval warfare in the middle of the 18th century, and their success against wooden-hulled warships, even thick-hulled wooden-hulled warships like a ship of the line, like Pacificator, will lead to future warships being covered in iron plates to reject those exploding shells. At this time, there was some concern whether the fuse would effectively detonate the projectile. And so they needed a live test against a live ship to be able to prove conclusively that Paxan had developed a way to make these guns work. Exploding shells had existed for probably 20 or 30 years prior to this. And they'd primarily been used in mortars, but they weren't very effective in flat trajectory rounds, specifically because in flight the fuse might blow out. It might be difficult to cut the fuse length because you're in theory cutting it, lighting it, putting it in the gun, and firing it. So if it takes too long to reload, it might explode in the gun. If you reload really quickly, it might hit the target, bounce off, and explode harmlessly later. But Paxan is the one who came up with the idea of a sabot, a wooden plug on the base of the gun, which means that the round projectile is not going to tumble down the barrel. It will always lay in the barrel with that plug at the base. With the plug at the base, they could put the fuse at the base so that when the powder charge detonates, it lights the fuse in the gun. And this system is proved in the destruction of Pacificator that the technology has come to fruition. It's only 2 Paxan guns that are fired, and the test ends up being relatively short because they're able to blow huge jagged holes in Pacificator pretty early on in the tests, and at that point everybody is convinced, and you start to see the widespread adaptation of shell-firing guns shortly after this 1824 test. What do you think was the most valuable SINKEX of all times? Certainly Billy Mitchell sinking battleships proved some things. People didn't really take those lessons at the time. Testing missiles or torpedoes seems pretty effective. There's some really cool footage out there of torpedoes detonating under ships and breaking their backs. Like, that's pretty awesome. But I really think Pacificator and the implementation of shell-fired guns that will then lead to armored ships, which will then lead to turreted armored ships like the one we're on today, was probably the most transformative SINKEX in human history, and possibly the first. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, as well as from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below for ways you can donate to support the channel. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us and the museum. Thanks for watching.